So, we're in beautiful London. It's warm today. And welcome, Nadia. And tell us a little bit about you and who you are and, how you came to be.
Okay. So, I'm Nadia Tuominen. At the moment, I'm a senior lecturer at Brunel University of London, but my background, and arguably still to date, is as an intelligence analyst practitioner. So, I worked for 10 years in the Metropolitan Police Service before moving out into, well, I always say it's more like a halfway house rather than the private sector. I worked for Sports Integrity, and the reason I call it a halfway house is because realistically, the time I was there, it was full of ex-police officers. So all ex-police in the private sector. And then I moved into the financial sector, and that's before joining Brunel. But also for the past, I can't think, where are we, 2025, for the past 12, 13 years, I've been working as a freelancer, delivering training, giving talks, and also doing some operational analysis as well. So I've got lots of things that keep me busy. But yeah, that's my bread and butter. I still call myself an intelligence analyst, but now I'm just in a slightly different part of that world.
And how did you get into working with intelligence and law enforcement? How did that happen?
Through academia, actually. So I did a master's degree in crime science, and there was a careers fair. And one of I can't think what his role was then. He was perhaps a senior or principal, I'm not sure what the term was, intelligence analyst from the Met, came along and spoke to us and said, hey, I think you'd be a good fit for being an analyst. Why don't you apply? So I did, and the rest was history.
Yeah, nice. And how old were you at the time? Do you remember?
Oh, would I have been 21, maybe?
And how was that, as 21, 22 perhaps, getting into and working with intelligence and law enforcement with all these, I'm guessing at the time, mostly men? Was it a lot of women too? And how was that?
It was interesting, I think, for me, because I'm not from the UK originally. It was actually a big culture shock in terms of getting to grips with the British way, if you will. So you had that and the policing way of doing things. The two together was quite something. But it was really good. It was really fun. It was very much a male-dominated environment. You did have women around, and you had some women in senior positions. So it wasn't entirely, it wasn't just me in a room full of men. There were women all around. But yeah, it was a learning curve. You learn a lot about who you are, how to function in that environment. I made a lot of mistakes, trying to get to grips. Yeah, trying to get to grips with everything. But it made me who I am today in terms of my personality, my worldview. So yeah, I wouldn't change it for the world.
And when you came in, did you know a lot about intelligence, or did you training on a job? Did you get training? How did that look?
So because of the master's degree on crime science, which really looked at crime analysis, and I think this is always an interesting topic for discussion, is what's crime analysis versus what's intelligence analysis. So I studied crime analysis in theory, but then was hired as an intelligence analyst performing crime analysis. So I didn't know a lot about intelligence per se. I understood problem solving and crime analysis. But as my career progressed, I started to learn more about intelligence. So it was really, in that sense, there was a lot of on-the-job, I won't say training, there was some training, especially in terms of systems and software. But actually, I think there was a lot of on-the-job learning and a lot of figuring it out as I go along and understanding what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, and that's an interesting approach, right? Because a lot of the time people, at least the people I've interviewed so far, said they had on-the-job training. But it is really an interesting differentiation where nobody probably, if I heard you correctly, they didn't show you how to do it. You had to figure it out yourself as you went along.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, there was quite a big delay. So there was, and there still is, an official training course that you complete when you join the police. But I didn't get mine until something like a year into the job.
Oh, yeah.
There was a big delay. So yeah, it was just quite curious, the approach. But I think still the presence of formal intelligence analysts, intelligence researchers, intelligence units in the United Kingdom was still quite new. And they were still figuring out what they need to do with these people, how these units function.
Yeah.
So some stuff was there, but it wasn't quite operating as seamlessly as it might be now.
Yeah. And the type of training you got, was it like how to do it in the police, or was it, critical thinking, structured analytical techniques, or was it a little, it could have been better type of thing?
Good question. I really don't remember.
Oh,
no,
well,
I don't.
that tells a lot, doesn't it?
I remember bits and pieces. In my mind, there was a lot of different stuff that was thrown at you, but the actual content, I honestly can't remember. I more remember the follow-up training courses that you got, for example, in geographic information systems, or how to use SQL or things like that. So yeah, I honestly, everybody always talks, you'll hear perhaps about the NIAT, National Intelligence Analyst Training. That was what I received, and I remember it was 2 weeks long, I think. But honestly, no, I can't remember the content. Is that terrible?
Yeah, no, and I'm not so worried about the content, though. It's just the general idea of you got training, good, and it's specialized in terms of it was by and for police and law enforcement, or is it just general, and then you have to figure out how to apply it?
Again, still I can't remember the specifics.
Yeah.
The one thing I do remember was that it touched very briefly on disclosure. So this idea of, when you go to court, you have to disclose things, and there's certain legislation that governs that. It was really brief. And it didn't resonate with me at the time because I wasn't at that stage of my career yet where I was going to court and, preparing witness statements and things like that. And I remember looking back and wishing that that had been delivered more frequently, for longer, with more context. But, in that sense, it was tailored to policing because they covered elements like that. But honestly, no, I can't remember what was in the rest of it.
And that's completely fine. How long did you work with intelligence in the law enforcement? Yeah, probably you said before, but I can't remember now.
Just shy of 10 years.
Yeah. And what made you switch? What was the sort of the decisive moment where I don't want to do this anymore?
It was when austerity hit the UK and everything changed. So I used to work with units, with the detectives, with the whole team around me, and there was a good flow of conversation, information, ideas, and then we all faced redundancies. And then everybody who remained got put into a hub. So suddenly all the intelligence analysts and researchers were together, and the proactive teams were away from you, and the taskings would come in, and it was all very remote, and it just felt like a step backwards for me at the time. And also then there was no real opportunity to develop. I had nowhere to go. I had nothing to learn. Not that I had nothing to learn. I had no opportunity to learn the things I wanted to learn. So I just felt stuck. I felt like I'd taken a step backwards with my career with no opportunity to develop. So that was when I said, right, I need to look at going somewhere else, because I'm no good to the police if I'm not enjoying what I'm doing anymore.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel like I could wholeheartedly do my job to the best of my ability because of the impact of other financial cuts that had happened, impacting everything about the way policing worked. So I felt like I needed to move on.
Yeah. And where did you end up then?
So as it was at the time, I worked for the Tennis Integrity Unit. That's now called something else, International Tennis Integrity Association, I think.
Yeah. And how was that transition going from law enforcement to tennis? Basically intelligence, I guess, but yeah.
Yeah, it was, like I said in the introduction, because it was basically staffed with ex-police officers who already had a decent understanding of intelligence. So that foundation was there. It's not like you're walking into the private sector and trying to talk to people who have no concept. They did have a concept, so it made it easier. But that said, some of the cultural issues, if you will, that existed within policing, therefore came across into that area. But that's fine. It's totally navigable. And it was an opportunity to really think about how intelligence operates in that context away from law enforcement. So it's really interesting, really exciting.
Yeah. What are your sort of, not teachable moments, but sort of aha moments you can take out of that now when you look back at it? You just touch upon it, right? But
I suppose one thing, and sometimes people think I'm mad for saying it because there are so many people who hate this framework, but have you heard of the National Intelligence Model?
I'm Norwegian, so probably not.
No, it's a UK framework that sets up how intelligence works within an organisation. It's like a business model. And it's shortened to NIM, right? Abbreviation is NIM. So when you're in policing, everything was, is that NIM compliant? Is that in line with NIM? Everyone got sick of talking about NIM. If you speak to NIM about NIM to people today, you will find many people who understandably say it's not good enough, it's not up to date. Fine. When I left policing and went to the private sector, I had a sudden realisation of how valuable a framework like NIM is. I'd taken it for granted up to that point. But being thrown into a totally different environment makes you realise that, yes, you do need to approach this with these frameworks in place. And although you can't just take it and transplant it onto a different organisation, it gives you an idea of what you need to consider to make it a success wherever you're working. So that was a light bulb moment for me, because I thought I hated NIM. And then I moved to tennis and went, actually, it's really helpful.
Yeah, and from my experience, there is no framework in the private sector. We have the NIM in the UK, but that's more law enforcement focused, I guess.
Yeah.
But you also have the ICD 203 in the States, where I think, from my perspective, every intelligence agency have to follow some sort of standard. It's by law, basically, over there. We're missing that in the private sector.
Yeah. They're two different things as well, though. So the ICD 203 speaks very much about what you would expect of the traits, the qualities, the standards, like you said. Whereas NIM isn't so much about standards. It's about, right, how is this going to work? How are we going to divide up the business so they operate? What assets do you need? What resources do you need? How are they going to work with each other? Rather than looking then at the standards of those resources and assets within that. So slightly different, but I would agree to a certain extent that there's no real framework in the private sector. But I do find, because the private sector is now getting more and more heavily saturated with ex-law enforcement, that a lot of NIM is being transplanted into the private sector, and all the other elements, all the other frameworks that are out there, they're being pulled in, and new frameworks are being created, but they're bespoke to the organisation.
I just realized I have to look up NIM now and try and learn about that, because I've generated like a mind map of intelligence infrastructure, and one of the key elements I talk about is the intelligence management, where that's basically what I think is NIM, and I have to look into it just to verify. That's how you structure and plan how to set up the intelligence function, what you need, the resources, people, training, who talks to who, how is everything structured.
Yeah.
Is that the same, or same but different?
It's not quite that detailed.
Yeah.
It was, when did it come about? 2002? Oh, God, I should know this like the back of my hand. You look at it now and you will say it is old. It could be so much better. But yeah, it's more like, you need this kind of IT equipment. You need access to data. You need analysts. You need researchers. Maybe, and the one thing it talks about is different levels. We talk about local level, cross-border, international, national. How do those three talk to each other? So the meetings that you need for those things to flow efficiently, if you will.
Yeah, I need to look at this, because this might be what I'm looking for in terms of creating an idea for a framework. If you're going to set up and start an intel function, what do you need? How does it flow from strategic to operational to technical? How do you what sources do you need? What type of people training? It is in...
There are elements of it.
Yeah. So this is interesting. I want to have a look at it. Thank you.
No worries. Lots of other countries then took NIM and tried to figure out whether or not they should just apply it as is or adapt it. So you'll find variations of NIM in New Zealand, I say variations of NIM, that might be doing them a disservice, but you will see echoes of NIM in New Zealand, in Canada, in the US. I believe it's the US who decided it doesn't work for them, so they changed the way that it was done, but I'm not confident on that. So
this gives me grounds to start researching and digging into this and figuring out what to do more with it. So that was tennis. You then moved again. Why?
Because of an opportunity. Again, I wasn't sure how much room there was for growth and development within tennis, and a job became available in the financial sector. And coming back to why I left policing, one of the ways in which I wanted to develop was in terms of financial crime, economic crime. And that avenue was repeatedly closed to me. So when a job opportunity came up in the economic crime area, I thought, well, actually, that's something I've always wanted to do. So off I went again. Yeah.
And how was that? Was that pure intel, or was it cyber, or
It wasn't cyber. It was economic crime, and this is where the blurred line comes between investigations and intelligence. So I think I'm trying to remember, because we had quite a few name changes over time, but eventually we ended up being called the Financial Investigations Team, and there was a separate intelligence unit. And I think that's still something that is really difficult to pick apart. When you're dealing with crime, where's the line between investigations and intelligence? Is there one? But it was purely focused on economic crime, money laundering, things like that, as opposed to cyber, because there would have been a different unit that dealt with that.
And we see this shift. I work in the finance sector as well, and we see the shift now from purely focusing on cyber and cyber incidents, if you will, to be more financial crime prevention, where cyber is an element. And then financial crime can also be terrorism funding. What do they do afterwards? What are they're using and spending their money on, and how is that part of a bigger machine, if you will? That's been become a really bigger focus of the last 2-3 years, at least in the Nordics, in the finance sector. So financial crime prevention is now sort of the buzz in my region, at least.
Okay.
So we see that change. And then you are in academia.
Yes.
How did that go about? Being a pracademic, I'm jokingly calling myself that.
No, I call myself that.
Practitioner becoming an academic.
No, I call myself that. Quite honestly, it was a change in my personal circumstances that made me reconsider what was right for me in terms of managing a full-time job and what I wanted to get out of things. And I'm really bad at saying no to a new opportunity as well. So when the opportunity came up and I thought, well, hang on a minute, this could work. It could fit with my new circumstances, and also it would be an opportunity to start talking about intelligence analysis. Specifically at the time, I was brought on to teach police officers. And I thought, well, this is great, because police officers and intelligence, they can be quite separate. And it's a known issue. There's a communication issue between the two. So maybe I can start to bridge that gap. Maybe I could start to talk to police officers who are quite new in the job about intelligence and intelligence analysis, and let's get things going from the right foot from the outset. So off I went again.
And it's sort of closing the circle a little bit, isn't it? You started your education, you got an opportunity, now you're going back and sort of teaching and helping new potential candidates to become good analysts or crime investigators, depending on which path you want to go.
Well, we've got a new postgraduate certificate launching in September, and it's in criminal intelligence analysis. And it is this idea of, let's put something out there that is accessible to people, that will help new people get into the field, but also help existing practitioners, have that opportunity to get some qualification behind their name. And I think, coming back to what you asked me about, what training do you have? This was always the problem within policing. You could do 10, 20, 30 years in policing and leave with no qualifications to your name.
Yeah.
Well, let's make those qualifications and let's make them accessible.
Yeah, and make it count, right? So when and if and ever you want to get out of law enforcement to do something else,
exactly,
you have something to show for.
Exactly.
If it's a bachelor or at least some sort of certification that it means something.
Exactly. Yeah. And that was a barrier I had when I was trying to leave. I didn't have all these fancy certificates and letters after my name. I had a master's, which was great, but people were interested in, have you done this program, this certification, this? I was, no. And also the catch-22 is you don't earn enough as an intelligence analyst in the police to be able to afford to pay for these things. Mm-hmm. So you're stuck.
And law enforcement doesn't have money to send you to those type of certifications either. You're now in education.
I don't. I think because I'd spent 10 years delivering training and, at least attempting to undertake some qualifications in relation to teaching and training, that was the thing that allowed me to get a foot in the door in academia, because traditionally you do need a PhD or you need a formal qualification in teaching and training. So, I think it was the combination, just all the right circumstances came together at the right time that allowed me to really, to get my foot in the door. And so now I'm here.
And also, you mentioned now, and you mentioned before, you do training.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about the training you do, and how did that come about, and how's it going?
Yeah, so I've been training for years, and I can't lie, the first job, or the first couple of jobs I had, I mean, some of them were great. They were real eye-openers, and it was a case of other people in that space delivering training to intelligence analysts or whatever, suddenly needing last-minute cover. And they found me on LinkedIn and went, you can do this. I was like, really, can I? And I got thrown in at the deep end, really. I'll say it now, I didn't know what I was doing at all. Gave it a shot. I hated it.
Oh.
I absolutely hated it. I was like, I'm never doing this. Training, teaching is not for me. It's rubbish.
And now 10 years later.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not even sure how it changed. It was something that I did keep doing, less out of choice and more out of, okay, right, fine, I'll do this for you. To help you out. I don't want to do it. I don't like training. But then suddenly, I think when I started to realise how valuable it is to see the light bulb moments that people have, you think, oh, actually, I did that. I helped you. Did I? Not I did that, but I helped somebody get to that point.
Yeah.
And actually, that's quite cool.
Yeah.
What other ways can I come up with to help more people have those light bulb moments? Yeah. So that's how it started off. Delivering training in intelligence analysis, mainly. But my sort of segue away from that, which I'm personally really interested in, is how we think. It's not so much about the trade craft of analysis. You mentioned structured analytic techniques. I will discuss those within my training as an option, but I'm more interested in the way that our cognitive functions and what we can do to improve on that as human beings.
Interesting. So that's more of the psychology of intelligence, perhaps, or?
Yeah, it aligns quite well with, Hewer's infamous book of the psychology of intelligence analysis. There's a lot of alignment there. But it's taken me down all sorts of weird and wonderful avenues of different disciplines, whether it's philosophy, whether it's mathematics, whether it's neuroscience. There are so many different avenues that you can pick from that will ultimately help you become somebody who is a better thinker, or at least a more self-aware thinker, that lends itself really well to intelligence analysis. So that's my personal preference. That's what I like to teach.
I agree, and it is refreshing to see that the way we think and understanding teaching, that individuals can learn about their biases, how to identify them, how to deal with them, reduce the effects of them, if that's what you're doing, But that's at least my anchor right now is, when you say these things, I think about biases in our intelligence analysis, how we apply different techniques to reduce them, and understanding all of those things that goes into our processing, our analysis, how then the recipients are processing and using the information we have. Is that in the same vein? Or?
It is, absolutely. And I used to certainly talk a lot and teach a lot about cognitive bias. But I've got to be honest, the more I did that, the less I liked to talk with that phrase, cognitive bias. I don't find it helpful at all. So I've kind of not stepped away from it, but my focus is very much on helping people, understand that biases aren't necessarily this evil thing that you need to get rid of. You need to know that they are there. So it's helping people develop that self-awareness. And biases aren't always bad. I'm not saying I'm a trailblazer by any stretch of the imagination, but I am trying to change the way that people think about biases. Because I don't feel like we ever do particularly well if we're in a training environment where we're told that there's this thing about us that's really, really bad and we need to stop doing it. So can we change the conversation and talk about this in a different way, in a more positive, forgiving way?
Yeah.
I don't think we'll start to see good change until we're a little bit more forgiving of each other and ourselves.
We're going to switch gears a little bit and go into intelligence. And, the first question I usually ask all my respondents are, what is your view on what intelligence is and isn't? It's a broad question, but, from your perspective.
Intelligence is not regurgitating information.
Amen.
Intelligence is not making an accurate, without doubt, prediction.
Agreed.
Intelligence is different things depending on where you work, but ultimately about being able to make an assessment of something that has already happened or something that might happen in the future, and using solid reasoning to allow you to get to that point of the assessment. It is inductive reasoning, very much so. Not that abductive reasoning doesn't have a place, it does, as does deductive, but ultimately it is about this process of reasoning, however that happens, that allows you to take a step further forward, that provides you with some insight that you were unaware of before, or perhaps not confident in.
I agree. I think a lot of people have a tendency to call intelligence this magic, right? It just it's something, it's magic. But I don't think so. I think intelligence, as you just said, it is, to me at least, it is a process. Well, actually, to me, intelligence might be three things, depending on if you're talking about the product, the process, or the overarching program that enables you to do intelligence as a whole, right? A lot of people, when they try to define it or talk about it, mix up everything here and say, no, are we talking about the program, the process, or the end product?
Okay.
And if you define it from a certain perspective, your definition is about that. When I read all these academic papers and stuff, and they try to define intelligence as this, and nobody knows what it is, and everyone's I'm like, no, let's. If a agency has a certain focus and a certain mandate, their definition has to be surrounding that. A different organization with a different mandate in a different country even, or even in the same country, like CIA versus FBI, they have different definitions for a reason, because they are different. They use it differently. They have a different purpose. So I have a problem with we make problems where there are none. We have to be critical in academia, right? We have to criticize everything and discuss, and because that's driving stuff forward. But we've been trying to do this for 20 years. Why can't we just move forward? Let's agree that there are different versions out there.
Yeah.
As long as you know mine and I know yours, we can agree then that's what we're talking about when we work together on this, and then we can move forward rather than we don't need this mathematical answer with two lines under it and that's what it is. We need to move past it. That's sort of my whew.
No, completely. And it aligns with, intelligence itself, as in we can agree what intelligence is not. And I think that's perhaps more helpful than trying to agree what intelligence is. And that aligns very well to when you're producing an assessment, you want to rule out the hypotheses that you can show not to be true, but you're going to put your eggs in the basket of the hypothesis that still has some credibility to it. You might have proved everything else to be wrong, but this is the area in which we're agreeing there is some possibility. Same concept.
Yeah. And to me, intelligence is also a combination of forward-looking and forward-leaning. So to me, forward-leaning is, although we're doing intelligence now about something that has happened, someone will probably try to make some sort of decision off of this, not now, but in 5 minutes, 5 days, 5 months, right? That's the forward-leaning part.
Okay.
The forward-looking to me is that when we do the foresight. We're looking beyond the horizon, beyond the reasonable stuff that we know, I mean. And we're trying to figure out alternative futures, looking at different scenarios and what might that look like, and how can we enable the decision maker by understanding the options, the possibilities out there, because that's another thing, right? One is the threat, the danger. The other is the opportunities. That those two things, it's not either or. I think we should focus on having more focus on not just the threat, but also here are opportunities that might be beneficial for the organization or the decision maker. What are your thoughts on that?
I like the distinction. I like the fact that they both mention forward, because that's the other thing about intelligence, and I think I can't remember who said this. Intelligence is information that's designed for action. This idea that you don't just produce your assessment, something has to happen with it, which would line up with the forward-leaning thing, even if you're assessing past events. So yeah, I agree. I think it's a helpful way of thinking about things to ensure that analysts don't stay in the now and don't do something, because as well as a collective, what would you call a group of analysts?
Analysts.
Yeah, but what, like you have a flock of birds or a murmuration of starlings. I don't know what you'd call a group of analysts. I think we should try and come up with a collective term for them. But on the whole, my experience is they can be quite shy, they can be quite reserved, quite unconfident. And actually, they need something to remind them that they need to push the world forward. They need to push the investigation forward. So the idea of having forward leaning as well as forward, was it focus that you said?
Forward looking.
Forward looking.
Yeah.
I think that's a really helpful way to frame things.
I learned that from a lady from the FBI that I interviewed a couple of months back, and she was like, but everything we do in intelligence is about the future.
Yes.
I'm like, whoa, tell me more. Yeah. And it is about the decision someone is making after you have delivered your report. Yeah. It is forward leaning in that sense, right? And at some point we have to agree that the data we have doesn't help us much, and that's when we turn into the forward lean and looking. Beyond the horizon, beyond where the data can help us, the history, the current and the history. And one of the in Norway we had a famous intelligence guy, I guess, and he said that the past is merely an echo of the future. You can have a sketch of the future, but it won't be the same. You can get some idea of what it might look like, but if you sketch it on a wall, you'll see that it's actually a little different. Sometimes a lot, sometimes just a little, depending on how much you zoom in on the details. And I think that also helped me quite a bit to understand that the concept of intelligence isn't to have the facts, as you said before. It is about to have the options to understand the possible futures. That's where I had this, that makes so much sense. So when I teach, and I talked about this before when we talked about biases and stuff, I try to give the students the understanding of intelligence and how it can help you think better, how it can use the tools, either if it's structured analytical techniques or digital tools to build mind maps or others, and collaborate with your team to build an understanding that enables you to think, but also enables you to give good support. Where intelligence is decision support, and to me, sort of that is the mantra for me, at least.
I think perhaps the only thing where I would differ, and it's not necessarily differing actually, it may just be adding on, bearing in mind that I come at this from a perspective of investigations. So a lot of the work that I've undertaken is in that context of you are investigating a series of offences, a conspiracy or whatever it may be. The only time I get a little bit funny sometimes is when people talk about support. And they talk about the support function, and they talk about the support analysts provide. And they do, a lot of the times, support decision makers. Sometimes they are the star of the show. Sometimes they are, all the time, they are a specialist function who are deserving of the respect and remuneration that a specialist function should get. I think it's happening increasingly, but I get funny every time I hear the word support, because I think as a profession that word holds us back, because you're seen as, you won't be able to see what I'm doing if you're just listening to me on audio, but if you hold your hand at the bottom, that's where the analyst would live if they are supporting the thing that is on top of them, which are the superstars who are making the decisions and doing all of this, and it's not always the case. They can be, the analyst can be the one to figure everything out, to be the light that suddenly provides all the answers or shows the line of inquiry that is the best option. And I don't think that the term support is always particularly helpful. But then that said, like you mentioned a conference. I hosted the Analyst and Decision Maker conference back in April, recognising how important it is to build that relationship. And I'm always taking decision makers to task, saying, stop calling analysts your support staff. They might be supporting you, but I want you to start calling them specialists at least, to elevate them in your mind and stop. Maybe this is unique to the UK, maybe this is unique to my experiences, but stop looking at them as, somebody there to support you, that they are a fundamental, vital part of your functioning team. Because I think that could have good ramifications for the profession, for the intelligence analysis output, and for the decisions that are made by whomever might be making those decisions down the line.
I agree, actually. And I mean, my follow-up question would be, what is the alternative word? And you said it. It's not support staff. It is, a specialist function. I really enjoy that. And I think it might be like, for me at least, English is my second or actually it's my third language. So it might be, semantics. But at the same time, it is an important distinction in terms of how we think and how we process different words.
Yeah.
I like that approach. I'm going to think about that too, and how, how specialist role rather than the support role. We don't have the support, and I'm using air quotes, issue. You're the first person to actually mention it after having a ton of conversations about a lot of people, both in cyber and intelligence and stuff. This is an interesting.
There's a whole field of literature that covers it. I talked about joining the police. It was in 2006, and this is at a time where it was really well documented that there was a cultural challenge of embedding what were called support staff in this environment of, I know best, I'm a police officer, I'm out on the streets, what can you tell me that I don't know? I've got what's called a copper's nose, police officers' instinct, if you will. They know better than you ever could. And that's where I think the support element really came into it. And there are so many contributing factors that I feel compound this issue that I perceive, and maybe I'm out of date. Maybe people don't perceive this to be a problem anymore. But certainly in my time in intelligence, it was this idea of you are support staff, somehow you are lower on the ladder than other people, which actually interestingly I didn't find in the private sector. I found it refreshingly different. There was hang on a minute, you're the expert in intelligence.
That's what I meet every day.
Yeah, but that was unique to the private sector. But there was this, you had an opportunity to shine really and be like, actually let me show you what I can do. Let me tell you what I think. Let's have a discussion. In some places in policing and law enforcement, I think it works very well. In others, I think it's, give me your findings and I'll go away and have a look at them, but I'm making the decisions. But thank you very much. Almost patting you on the head, like, well done.
Oh, so we have we probably have a combination of the two, at least from my experience in cyber and also from an intelligence work I did, where I was the expert. But the decision was made by whoever I was supporting. Now, to me, a decision maker isn't the CEO. It isn't the board. To me, the decision maker is whoever I'm supporting. Okay. It might be a colleague. It might be someone who's working in admin. It might be someone who's working with detecting, malicious activity in the network to block an email or not. Or it might be the board, or it might be the chief risk officer. To me, the decision maker, I'm supporting them to enable them, I guess, to make a good decision and also understand the opportunities, but also we don't have you're the support. We're actually, I call the expert. You're the expert. What do you think? Or what is the problem here? Help me understand so I can make a decision. That type of dialogue is more common, it seems, from what I hear from you and your experience. Yeah,
I think probably my own personal experience shines through here, that I get quite prickly at the sound of support. But it makes, when you put it like that, it makes perfect sense. You are there to support whoever it is needs to make a decision. Yeah. And that should also include yourself as an analyst. You should be very good at making decisions in your personal life, I'd like to say. But when you are treated with that respect for your abilities, your profession, your cognitive skills, whatever it is, then suddenly the word support doesn't sound bad. It sounds positive. It sounds useful. Yeah. So, different frameworks.
Sure. Yeah. So now that we've talked about intelligence, what is your view and understanding of AI or artificial intelligence?
Probably quite limited, to be honest. I'm not, I'll be perfectly frank, I am not technologically minded at all. I still use pen and paper, always be that way. I'm not resistant to technology. I recognise the value it can bring, but I will always be firmly rooted in pen and paper, because actually I think it's not just I think, it's shown to be particularly helpful for cognitive functioning. So pen and paper will always be my best friend. My understanding of AI, I don't know that I could provide an understanding. I recognise how it exists and the formats it exists in our world at the moment. For example, the large language models. I also understand that it has existed for a long time already around us in lots of ways that we don't appreciate. And I recognise that it can bring benefits to intelligence, but also some real risks. And it makes me it makes me nervous, not because I think it's not valuable. It makes me nervous because I don't know that not as a profession, but coming back to this idea of there's us, if you will, the analysts, and everybody else, the consumers, the people who work with, the decision makers. I'm not sure the bigger picture has a solid enough understanding of what intelligence is to allow the use of AI to be done in a way that will be best, I think is all I can articulate for now.
Yeah. One need to know how everything works within, let's say, a large language model. No. It's same with a car these days, right? You have your key and it's in your pocket, the door opens, it's magic, you sit down, the car adjusts to you in terms of mirrors and seat and air conditioning and last radio station. It just happens. You don't need to understand the code behind it, but you need to know how to drive safely. You're still in control in that sense that you tell it when you pull, the gear and then the gas and the steering, you control the vehicle, but you don't understand and don't need to understand everything that goes on within every single part of that machine. Same with AI, you just need to be able to use it responsibly.
Yeah.
Right? That's my approach to it. So once we get past that, we can then start having better discussions of, well, how do you do responsible use of AI? How do you not let the AI just get away with everything without being critical? I have an issue with this, with a lot of people who use the technology don't use their critical thinking. The AI said, or the LLM in this case said, therefore it's truth or fact, or when they learn that, oh my gosh, the LLM was incorrect. It lied, in air quotes. It didn't lie. It's a design. Lying implies that the AI or LLM has a conscious. It decided to give you, it lied to you. But it actually is combining words statistically and combining them together, right? That's what it does.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't know the difference between the finger and the knuckle and the wrist. It doesn't know the concept of this. It's just words, right? It doesn't understand things. When it gives you an answer and then you ask, how did you get to this answer? Break it down for me. It won't go back and look at what it did. It'll generate new words based on your query. That's where people aren't critical. That's where we actually need to understand the benefits, the limitations of the technology we use. We can't drive off-road with our town car. We can with a off-road car to a certain extent. We can't drive on or underwater in a car, but with a special adapted vehicle, yes, we can. Understanding these things will make us better and more proficient of using the technology in a good way and navigate it through the landscape of everyone else using it. I'm using an analogy quite heavily here, but yeah.
Yeah, I think the explainability element is really important within law enforcement, and it has come up again and again in recent conversations. If you have used some form of AI in the production of whatever it is you're presenting at court, you're the one who has to stand up in the witness stand and explain it. And if you don't understand how that has been achieved, you're in trouble. So we again at the conference, the Analyst Decision Maker Conference, we had a talk from Professor Tim Grant, and he was talking exactly about that, the explainability of AI. And, for some people, it was a real struggle to get their heads around the whole concept of AI and the detail of it. And like you say, you don't need to know too much detail, but you do need to understand what it can do, what it can't do, to a certain extent, how it works, because also, and that's something we can come back to, how you talk to it to get the best information. But this idea of explainability in the courtroom is one of those things where I'm really apprehensive that we're going to go down some kind of path that we shouldn't, because if you can't understand how you've got to this point where you have this exhibit or whatever it is, then should you really be using it at all? Is there actually a place for it when it comes to evidential work?
And has it a place in intelligence? And one of the questions I usually ask a lot of people is, if I give you now a piece of paper and I said, two people worked on this for 2 days and, this is their conclusion, their analysis, how much would you trust it? Okay, you give it a score. Great. Now, here's the same product. It took an AI 2 seconds and it's 100% AI, no human involved. How much do you trust it?
Yeah.
Would that be higher or lower than the human?
Yeah.
And that's an interesting thing, right? Because when people actually use the AI, they take the answer and run with it.
Yes.
But when we ask the question the way I did, I'm assuming that the answer would be lower when it's 100% AI than compared to humans. That's my assumption. I don't know yet. I would love to figure it out, but
You'd assume the trust would be lowered, or
yeah, the trust from my, if I ask you, would you trust the report from 2 people or 100% in the trust? That's going to be floop.
Yeah. It's funny. I spoke to somebody, it might have even been today, I'd lose track of my day so quickly, about an output generated by AI, because we're having a tentative little exploration to see whether or not a large language model could offer benefits within the world of policing. And I looked at the output and thought, I worry that, because it was quite almost, I don't want to belittle it or do it a disservice, but it was almost a journalistic output. It was a narrative style. And I looked at it and thought, if a journalist had written that and an officer were to read it in the paper, they would probably treat it with a degree of skepticism, maybe actually some of that critical thinking. But if that's an AI-generated output and they read that, would they be more likely to actually have some faith in it? Because it's, in quotation marks, objective to a certain extent.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know which way that trust would go.
No, me neither. And that's interesting, right? Do we put a machine to higher standards than human? Because humans make mistakes too.
Yeah.
We make, we have biases, we have cognitive pitfalls, we make mistakes in general. Why do we put the technology at a higher standard? But at the same time, the research shows that the error rate of an LLM is between 40 and 70% depending on the task and the task and the input.
Yes.
And you never know which. You never know when, how much. You have to actually go in and talk to the data to figure that out. And that, to me, I guess, is the real problem.
Yeah. The input is a massive issue. And it's not something that anybody's really spent a lot of time on understanding in terms of, when we talk about the general population. Forget AI. When people talk to Google and they go in this Google search bar, rather than asking it to retrieve information in a way that will get you the information you want, people will ask it a question as if they're talking to another human being. And they don't seem to stop and think, I'm not talking to a human being, I'm talking to a database or a machine or whatever it is. So if we can't do that already, some of us can obviously, but if generally people can't do that with Google, how are we going to have any success with AI?
Yeah.
It's but then that is more, I suppose, what AI is designed to do, perhaps, is to recognise the questions it's being asked in a human way. But it all gets too much for my mind, if I'm honest. I need to break it down in small pieces and handle each small piece individually.
Yeah.
But I don't think people even recognise that they're talking to a machine and all the pitfalls that come with that.
Yeah, I think some people have difficulty separating the two. I think so. I think a lot of people using it as a tool, and me particularly, I use it in certain ways for certain purposes as a tool. And some people of those I've interviewed so far, some are actually going as far as saying, treat it as a really, really fresh and young intern that can do really mundane, simple tasks, but you have to check it. Trust but verify type of thing. Right, so you can take a massive data set and it can give you a lot of stuff, when you ask it the right questions, but you still have to prod, ask and follow up and check, and even go into the data just to check that this makes sense.
Exactly.
As you would a young and inexperienced intern.
Yes.
If you treat it that way, it's gonna save you a lot of work.
Yeah.
But still, you have to go in and follow up type of thing. Right? So trust and verify, basically. I like that analogy and that approach to it at the moment. It is changing all the time, but at the same time, the system, the LLMs do not think, in my mind. They don't reason. They don't understand concepts. They're generating words, and it's getting better and better. Yeah. In quotation marks, understanding because of the human interactions and the learnings and the feedback and the guardrails it's getting. But at the same time, there are massive research done lately. So Apple had a famous paper. It's been sort of, there are two camps, right? AI is magnificent and AI, let's be more critical. It isn't actually as amazing as people say. Those are the two camps. And they are at war. So when you go on LinkedIn and other social media, you see a lot of people having these arguments about, there's this paper, haha, it's proof.
Yeah.
And then you have the other camp, aha, here's the counter paper that says your paper is BS. And it's just, I'm taking a step back and I'm following the discussions because there's a lot of interesting research coming out, but it's on one side is too sensational and the other side is too dark. So it's trying to balance everything is also a struggle.
Yeah.
In terms of, I want to go back to something you talked about before, and that was sort of the you do training, of course. But what type of training have you done? You said something about in law enforcement, you didn't get a lot of training, but I'm guessing over time you've been able to do trainings, courses, certifications, maybe?
Not masses, no, to be honest. Other than the NIAT I mentioned in my after my first year in police, there were odd training courses here and there. IT Analyst Notebook, using MapInfo, and very software specific bits of training like that. I think we had one course on report writing that was held internally, and I did do at the time, and I can't even remember what level it was, an NVQ, National Vocational Qualification. I think it was a level, I don't know, it could have been a level 3, 4, I'm not sure, but in intelligence analysis. They were piloting getting some kind of formal qualifications in for analysts, and I was part of the pilot. I don't know that it ever was rolled out after the pilot because it was quite challenging to complete. But I have that somewhere. But other than that, honestly, no, it's been learning on the job, and as a result, doing a lot of my own research into what I think would be useful. And that's just piled up over the years and led me to somewhere where I feel like I can actually package that and offer that as training for interested parties.
Yeah, and your experience counts as well, right? It's not about the certifications, it's your experiences and also how you package and communicate that in a good way. I mean, for me at least, I'm sure this is for you too and everyone else I talk to, usually at least, is the more you are working on it, better you understand. But when you start teaching it, you get so much more. I'm not sure if intimate is the right word, but you get so much closer to the topics you teach and how you communicate, and also the feedback you get from students over time help you adjust into that perfect little way of saying it, using examples, analogies, etc. I'm not sure if you had that too.
Yeah, absolutely. And you suddenly realize there were certainly things that I thought everybody, I mean, bearing in mind this is ridiculous, I didn't get the training, so why did I think everybody else knew all this stuff? But there were certain things that I was teaching and I assumed a level of knowledge from my students and it wasn't there, and I'm thinking,
I've done that too. I came in too high, if that makes sense. And I had to lower the bar a little bit because this to me was foundational. But this is a foundational course, so I have to actually talk about the foundations.
But some of it is just missing. It's like, I didn't realise we needed to know that. You think, hang on a minute, like some elements of logical reasoning. That's the fabric of being an analyst, is being able to reason logically. But it's not always taught. I think we're seeing a positive difference now as people who were analysts become analyst managers and they become in charge of the budget. Suddenly they are driving for the right kind of training to be in place for their staff. So you'll see there's a positive change happening in my experience over the years, the way things are moving. But it's you learn a lot about your own assumptions about the profession, a lot of challenges about what you even think, and forget about how you teach it, just about the topic itself. I found myself questioning lots and lots of different things that I'd never thought of while I was a practitioner.
Well, I had the same. When I came into the private sector, I thought because they were using cyber threat intelligence, I assumed they knew about intelligence. And then when I started meeting people, they were using the language, right? They, intelligence requirements. They talked about, we're going to use, SATs. And I'm like, holy moly, these are my people. This is going to be great. 6 months in, I'm like, this is BS. They're talking the talk, mostly pushed by vendors. Now I'm talking cyberspace. And I thought, actually, honestly, because I'm moving into the finance sector, they have the money, the resources, they are probably going to be good. I'm like, they're not bad. They're really good at cyber, really good at doing cyber analysis. But when it came into the intelligence side, I expected the basics, at least, right, to be there. So a part of my job turned into be teaching, training, giving them the basics. having them collaborate on a full foresight scenario, teaching them about bias, about how to apply SATs into those biases and reducing them, and all of those things which I took for granted. But I realized that, as you just said, we need to, lower the bar a little bit and get them up to a certain minimum standard at least. You, because of academia, I'm guessing or assuming, you're generating perhaps papers and research, or are you teaching?
I am teaching, but slowly, I hope to be generating more papers, getting involved in some research. It's purely down to practicalities at this point as to why that isn't occurring, but in the future there should be more of that coming, certainly. And it's something I'm interested in, like you doing your PhD. You're getting to ask a question that matters to you and going off and finding the answers in the hope of improving the profession with what you find. And that is what I would love to do as well, because it's like you said, giving back. I might not be a full-time practitioner anymore, but everybody else is, and I want to make that the best environment for them, to give them something that they can use and succeed and thrive. So if I can poke around a little bit and find some answers, then I would love to do that.
Yeah. We work with intelligence. There's this discussion about success, about value. How do you, from your perspective, how would you suggest that we measure value of using intelligence in a decision process, or...
It's really challenging, isn't it?
Yeah.
Again, if I take it back to law enforcement, and if you're working on tactical, proactive investigations, you have an element of measurement there, because if your analysis leads to, I don't know, the dismantling of a criminal network, or a series of people being arrested and taken to court and found guilty, arguably your analysis was a success, because you have that measure of guilty or not guilty. Did your evidence make that difference? Talking about that move from intelligence to evidence. But when you're talking about other things like strategic work or crime prevention even, suddenly it's this intangible thing of, well, if it did come true, your forecast, did it come true the way you thought it did? Therefore, can you look back and see whether it gets really complicated? How do you know if you prevented crime? That piece of intelligence analysis that developed that hypothesis, that implemented that change, well, how will you ever know if you were successful? Because, well, how do you measure crime prevention? It's an intangible thing that can be really, really challenging to measure. I think analysts can sometimes look back at their own work and self-evaluate, but don't often get the time to do that. But, you generated an assessment, come back to it a year later. Did your assessment bear fruit? What happened with it?
And should that be the responsibility of the analyst or the manager or the stakeholder? Who should have that, rear view mirror approach?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's something that should be encouraged in the analyst.
Yeah.
To be honest with themselves and look back and try and reflect on how they've performed.
Yeah.
Would it be fair if managers started doing that and using it as a performance measure? I don't know.
Oh, I didn't come at it from that perspective. I see what you're getting at. Yeah. No, from my perspective, it's more of from the stakeholder's perspective, the decision maker's perspective. Did the intelligence provide value that enabled them to do or reduce their uncertainty in some shape or way? What did they use the intelligence for? And if they can't answer that, then I have a problem. I have an issue with that, right? Then we're wasting time and resources and stuff that the stakeholder or decision maker didn't need.
Yeah.
If they're saying this was instrumental to my decision, bam, that's value.
Yes.
But if they're not saying that, or they can't articulate that, we can try and help them to figure out. But if they can't say it, I'm struggling with, are we doing stuff right? Should we change the way we do stuff? Should we figure out a better way to set this up so we can actually measure that value? Because otherwise we will only be looked at as the support.
Yeah, no, it's true. I think what you said I absolutely agree with. But then it comes back to, how well did you negotiate at the start?
Right.
People hate intelligence cycle, whatever. I think it's a perfectly useful framework again. At that direction setting phase, did you negotiate? Were you willing to engage and listen to what the analyst was saying and have that discussion? If not, are you ever going to get valuable intelligence? There are so many different ways of breaking it down.
I agree.
It's really challenging. I mean, other ways I've had discussions with intelligence managers before about, can you evaluate the success of an analyst by looking at how they are thinking about a problem? Is that component part of it actually something that talks about value? Maybe, let's face it, you don't always come up with magic. Sometimes you come up with stuff that doesn't, it is what it is. We don't have enough information. We can't take this any further forward. But what about the process that got us there? Did it identify some intelligence requirement that sent us off somewhere else? But then I suppose that comes back to what you were saying. Actually, it's materially useful because it takes you somewhere else.
And to me, you touch upon a really important point. To me, the intelligence dialogue, that's what we at least call it from where I came from. And that dialogue is part of figuring out who's asking for what are they going to use it for, what is the value, by what time, and what format and quality, all those things, right? But then I usually take the intelligence cycle backwards and saying, who's asking for what? What is that they need? That's the answer to the dissemination, right? The product and time and stuff. Then what do we need to do in terms of products and analysis? Well, to be able to do the analysis, what data do we have and what is missing? What do we need to collect? And then going back to the stakeholder and saying, these are the things you asked for by that time. With the resources and the people and the time we have, this is the quality and the type of deliveries you can get in 2 hours. This is what you can get in 2 days, and this is what you can get in 2 weeks. Oh, I need it in 2 days. That's great. Then we need to do this. This is going to cost that. No, the 2 hours is fine, and then in 2 days is fine, right? Having that discussion will set expectation management, but also, what are you using it for? And then 2 weeks later, what did you use it for? Right? Oh, I didn't use it. Really? Okay, so let's go back to the drawing board and figure out the way to do this better. Or we used it for this, and that actually led us into that started this question, then that gave you the reason, or us then, to start researching that, right? That dialogue is golden. Having that relationship with your stakeholders, depending on decision maker, depending on level, I don't care, have that dialogue so you can be a meaningful resource to them. So you're actually the expert, right? Going back to that.
Can you measure value all the time? Does it depend on the context of your organization and who's where? If you have somebody who just trusts their, whatever it is they want to believe, or whatever it is, it might be their gut, then is intelligence not of value? It becomes a really sticky.
Have you ever been part of implementing intelligence anywhere? Starting it where it wasn't before?
I mean, I suppose to a certain extent, in bits and pieces, not officially brought in a capacity of set up this unit. But when I moved to tennis, there was an existing intelligence capability. But, I mean, some of the things that I did there was actually introducing certain intelligence products, again taken from the NIM, recognizing that there was no strategic element, there was no strategic assessments going on, so introducing that. In other places I've worked, it's about making sure that and again, this is where investigators' intelligence, the analysts / investigators are producing is intelligence, taking them beyond the descriptive and into the assessment phase. So no, I've never been brought in to set up a unit afresh, but the places that I've gone, I've been able to plug certain gaps or, carve a new way forward that hopefully led to improved value.
Yeah. Did you ever get feedback in terms of that work, or?
Yes. I mean, it wasn't always positive, if I'm honest, but sometimes it's because people don't like doing things differently. And it can take a long time for value to start to show itself. I suppose I'm just thinking actually back to the first time that we had a real result in a particular unit, and the reaction from the people on the ground was, oh, so that's what intelligence can do. Okay, right, we're fully on board. Okay, let's start talking. And
that's a good aha moment, right?
Great, that's great. Yeah, these are people who don't need to know about intelligence, or they need to know very little, but suddenly that spark was there. It's like, and I feel like that's the case everywhere you go. You need to plug away. It doesn't matter what people are saying. Plug away if you believe in intelligence. Eventually that success story will come to you, and then you go, I told you so, look. And they go, oh, right, we're fully on board. But you have to be persistent enough to get to that point. To then be able to use it, and then you can start to change perspectives, change culture. So
I totally agree. In the coming 2-3 years, there probably, I think at least, AI will be more used than before. what do you think are issues or benefits or challenges, if you will, of AI coming in specifically into intelligence?
Issues, benefits, challenges. Okay. If we start with benefits and assume that people are aware of the limitations and risks of AI, then you potentially have a critical friend to hand. There is a lady in America called Dr. Julia Mossbridge. She has developed a large language model called the Analyst Gut Check. So there are people out there who are recognizing what AI can do for analysts. And I think that's great because, if we can figure out the operational security elements, you don't always have the time or the wherewithal to be able to check your thinking with somebody else, let's face it, in reality. So what if you have this thing that can test, push back on your hypotheses? You set it up deliberately to challenge everything you're saying and poke holes in it.
Yeah.
That's a real opportunity. So it could bring benefits in that regard. Issues and challenges, though, it comes back to that worry that we're not in a place where there's sufficient understanding of intelligence and analysis, and that it could start to replace analysts to a certain extent. It could start to be seen as something that can do the intelligence work because the appreciation isn't there for what intelligence work actually is. There is a tendency to lean towards the technological and to think that it provides, again, the magic solution. And I fear that people will start to turn to that more. Much like, I always get this. If you ask somebody in the room, what was the name of that, I don't know, that person, that place, that whatever, remember it from a few years ago, people just go, I'll just Google it. I don't want to just Google it. I want to have a conversation with you as a person. But people's first response is just Google it. So what happens when you get to a stage where it's just AI it? Don't ask the analyst, just put it into AI. AI will tell you. If you give analysts or, if you give people certain tasks now, certainly in an exercise I ran recently, the first thing they do is give the information to AI and go, what do you think? What have I got here? Is that really the first thing we want to be doing? But it's the first thing people seem to want to do. So if we can't challenge that, where are we going to end up? If that's the first port of call.
And how would you suggest we circumvent that? What would be one or two or three maybe ideas to ensure that we as analysts are seen as valuable in that process?
I don't think it comes down to intelligence and analysis. I think it comes down to society. We are a society of convenience, and ultimately that's where all the problems lie. Quick answers, convenience. Nobody has the patience. Analysis doesn't happen that quickly all the time. Sometimes it might, but people want answers now. They think that they have this super intelligent bit of kit that can give them the answers. I almost feel like I have an unpopular view that we need to strip everything away. How are you going to, people, how are you going to function if, I don't know, we saw today, I'm trying to get into here and the heat is melting the railways and I can't get in. What happens if the heat suddenly, I don't know, melts all our bits of software? I don't know.
Solar storm flies all the technology.
Yeah. I mean, we saw the blackouts in Spain and in Portugal, right? These things are a real possibility. Can you function without this stuff? How much have you actually offloaded? And I know it's been in academic research recently about cognitive offloading. Have you offloaded all of your abilities onto something else? I could rant about this forever. Ultimately, I think it actually comes back to a society human point, not an intelligence analysis point. We need to change the way people think about themselves and the world for it to have an impact in any profession. Yeah,
I totally agree. So when we now see that AI and machine learning and perhaps even LLMs are coming in more and more, how do you think that would change how we do intelligence? Or if at all?
Bearing in mind I come at this from law enforcement perspective, I perpetually have the concern about, ultimately, intelligence work does end up in the evidential domain. So I'm always going to be concerned about that, the explainability aspect. perhaps because my own understanding of AI is relatively limited. There are far more knowledgeable people out there than me, but when somebody produces something, I'm able to say, oh, that could be really helpful. And I'm certainly seeing lots of different potential opportunities in how you could use AI, but it all comes back to the caveat of, do you do it with the full awareness of the risks and limitations? My favourite use of it for analysts right now would be as a critical friend within operational security constraints. I do like it as a trainer in terms of generating synthetic data, but like you say, you have to even check that. I got it to generate some burglary data for me recently, and it started to suggest that, I don't know, a flat on the 3rd floor of a block of flats had a garage door. I was like, well, that's not going to happen, is it?
Because it doesn't understand the concept, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but I think my input in that regard is probably a bit limited. But I like to think that I'm able to evaluate the potential usefulness of something once it has been created. But I'd need a better understanding to consider different ways in which we could use it.
Yeah, and we as trainers and educators in your case is AI is something we have to deal with in terms of teaching and training. When I teach on high side, I mean in the secure environments, usually AI isn't the issue because they haven't figured out the way of this there are issues where you have some sort of agent that runs around and do stuff without them having to. They have to be able to control it, right, in some way, so form. But in the private sector, they're using, at least in cyber, they're using all the shiny tools.
Yeah.
Every vendor has AI. Every vendor has LLMs.
Yeah.
I mean, and they we have this AI. You can't do anything without AI these days. So that means us teaching and training, we have to use AI. But I focus more on it's a tool, and here are the benefits, and here are the drawbacks. You decide how much and at what level you use it, but trust and verify is the only thing I want you to remember. Until you get to the point where, it's 99 point something or whatever limit you have when it's good enough. Depending on the consequences of the decision, the level should be higher, and when it's low, so high consequence, high level, low consequence, then, you might accept 70% or 80%, correct. But somehow there needs to be a balance here. That's usually the few things I at least focus on when I do the teaching. So use the tools, but understand the limitations, understand the dangers. This is TLP red, so secret information basically. Should you put that into an online platform? The answer is no.
Yeah.
So you can't use the tool, right? So you have to use other tools.
Yeah.
You have to discuss with your colleagues. You have to discuss with your sharing or trusted communities.
Yeah. But then people are building things in-house as well, aren't they?
Yeah.
In-house LLMs, which I think is fine and fair enough.
Yeah, I think so too.
But still, those caveats apply.
They do. And that's the thing, right? Everyone, I just used AI, now it organizes my meetings. I don't want to be in your calendar with my name, my phone number stuff, right? Have you asked for my permission to do that? But that's a completely different discussion. If anyone wants to start working with or in intelligence, so let's say in your case, law enforcement, what are their backgrounds? What should they bring with them in terms of background, education, training, certification? What are your suggestions?
Well, I would say that as a person, you would want to be somebody who is curious and likes problem solving. You don't get overwhelmed by having lots of information. You love it because you get to figure out how to play with it all to get some meaning out of it. That should be your, fundamental approach to things. The reality is that a lot of places do require a degree level education. Certainly in the UK, law enforcement, if you want to join in intelligence, I don't know, that might have changed recently, I'm not sure. In which case, I suppose you would need to consider a degree. There are certain relevant ones that are very contextual, that will give you a leg up, so to speak. But then that said, part of the beauty of intelligence analysis is having lots of minds around you with different knowledge and perspectives. So, follow what you're interested in. And if you're a curious problem solver, then there's nothing to stop you being an intelligence analyst. I worked with somebody who studied theology. When I worked in the Met, I'd done crime science, she'd done theology. There are other people who've done maths or whatever. That's great because that brings that cognitive diversity to the room. always, I don't know, look out for opportunities to join and explore what would work for you. There are lots of different ways into the sector, I feel. I think it's good to start with good habits. So perhaps even if there might be an opportunity in the private sector, maybe there's some room for discussion about whether that should be your entry point, or should you start somewhere where intelligence has been about for a bit of a longer time, where there's more of a solid foundation. Sometimes I get concerned that the foundations and the standards in the private sector aren't where they need to be in certain parts of it. So I worry that such as this can sound really bad, but you know, the explosion of OSINT, open source intelligence.
OSINT, you mean? Open source information?
Yes, well, but this is it, isn't it? There are people who are fantastic at finding stuff online, and that is great, and I can't use 90% of the stuff that they do. I can't figure out, I don't know, what is it, where you are in the world by your shadow in that building, and I can't do that.
Me neither.
That's fine. But then what do you do with it? What, you know, hygiene practices have you, you know, InfoSec, hygiene practices are you using? Do you really understand what it means to be an intelligence analyst? So that's somewhere where I feel like actually we could be tightening the ship a little bit. There are some great people out there teaching on that topic who know what they're talking about.
I think everyone I've talked to have met people that has had a profound influence in their choices. Usually I use the analogy, when you look back, you see forks in the road and you made a decision that placed you where you are today. And fortunately or unfortunately, you know, had an impact on you. Do you have such a story where someone, you know, sort of nudged you in the right way or opened the door for you, or are you just self-made?
I genuinely don't know the answer to that. I don't think I've ever reflected to that extent on my career. There are certainly, you know, opportunities that have come my way, and I have certain people to thank for that because they've come to me and approached. But realistically also, if I wasn't open to opportunity and I didn't put myself out there, those approaches would never have happened. So it's a two-way street. But there is definitely a piece of advice that somebody gave me once, and it's not like I was a shy and retiring thing beforehand, but an old manager of mine, when I was working on kidnaps, she just said to me, "Don't be a wallflower," which I don't know if that means anything to you. With a
translate to anyone else who can listen.
Don't be a wallflower basically means don't sit quietly in the background. Don't blend into the background. If you've got something to say, speak up, speak loud, and make sure that you're heard. I think I already was speaking up quite loud by that point. I don't think I was ever very good at keeping myself to myself, but it made me realise the importance of being heard. You know, and that was in a critical incident, if you will, environment. You know, somebody's been kidnapped and you need to make sure that they're hearing what you're saying as an intelligence analyst. But I've definitely taken that forward. I don't think I am a wallflower. I think I speak quite vocally about things, sometimes deliberately controversially about things to stoke debate.
Me too.
It's it's important. It's important we keep talking about things that matter. So it applies in intelligence analysis, but it applies elsewhere as well. So that has been a really important piece of advice that stuck with me. I'll never forget it. I can even picture her saying it now. I need to have a good think about the people who helped me along the way.
Just give them a hug and just thank you. Thank you so much. On that note, thank you for taking the time to sit and speak with me about something I care a lot about, and it now turns out you do too. and we had a blast, so thank you so much for coming.
No, thank you. I hope it does prove of some use, even in some teeny tiny way.
Oh, it does. Thank you so much. Thank you.